The truth occurs. The truth occurs.
Hi everyone. So what do the Occupy Wall Streeters want? What is their one demand? That seems to be the big question. I had gotten the impression that their one demand had something to do with tax, and I had gotten that impression from the mainstream media, which isn't really a big surprise because most of the articles in the mainstream media about Occupy Wall Street seem to make it out to be about tax. Kinsley, ironclad demands for Occupy Wall Street. And notice it says tax reform specifically. Well, they're ironclad, so that must be what they want. Actually, they're not necessarily what Occupy Wall Street wants, but they're what Michael Kinsley wants. Number one, a really humongous jobs bill. A jobs bill, like stimulus program, creating jobs? What, with the government, borrowing more money from private banks to do that? I don't get it. Number two is abolish capital gains, as in tax capital gains. And third, end the Bush tax cuts. Again, more taxes. And fourth is expand the estate tax. That was the one that they used to call the death tax when they wanted to get rid of it. Again, more tax. More tax seems to be the only solution. Who's occupying Wall Street and what do they want? A primer. Oh good, a primer, that's what I need. So it says here that the protesters are the 99% and they're not happy that the other 1% is really rich while they're getting poor. Okay? And then they go on to define who are actually the 1% in Canada. And technically it's anyone who makes over $200,000 a year. Okay. I don't think that, anybody who just makes over $200,000 a year is the problem. I think the problem here is corporatism. It has to do with the laws that are in place to protect corporations over people and the government being in bed with corporations. And so again, what is taxing people who make over $200,000 a year going to accomplish? I mean, taxing them more because they're already paying a lot of tax. Some of them are paying as much as 38% tax. So, and then at the end of the article, they mention that technically anyone who makes over $53,000 Canadian a year is in the top 1% of earners worldwide. So if we're talking wealth redistribution here and more tax for the rich, watch out because that might include you. Here's an article from the Montreal Gazette. Occupy Wall Street, support Main Street. What you got to do is support Main Street and basically vote with your dollar. Consumers have choices. Well, they have less and less choice, again, because of free trade and outsourcing and everything is made in China. You buy everything from Walmart. I mean, whether it's Walmart or it's Zellers or it's the dollar store, it's really the same thing in the end, isn't it? But she says, what is the solution? We have a progressive tax system. We could go a lot further to, quote, fix income inequality. That fix is called communism, and it has perversities that would make most people a lot worse off. So at least she mentions that. But again, it's like they're making it out to be all about tax. So if you look at the websites from these Occupy movements, you'll see that it's very different from how they're being represented in the media. Here's Occupy Wall Street, and all they say is, we're the 99% that will no longer tolerate the greed and corruption of the 1%. They're not actually, asking for more taxes or anything like that specifically. I think that part of the problem is the use of the number 1%, because it seems to me that, like I mentioned from the other article, if anyone who makes over $200,000 is in that 1%, then we should really be talking about the 0.1% or whatever. Let's make it clear. We're not talking about people who are just successful with their business. We're talking about Wall Street and the excesses of these investment banks and their CEOs with their huge bonuses. And not only that, but all the problems in the system that, again, have to do with corporatism, the government being in bed with corporations. Here's an example. No food rights judge quits to work for Monsanto law firm. A Wisconsin judge who had recently ruled that farmers have no right to drink their own cow's milk quit working for the courts and went to work for Monsanto. That's revolving door government. That's a huge part of the problem. Here's Occupy Vancouver. Mention a run on the banks, but nothing about wanting more taxes. And here's Occupy Montreal. a non-violent gathering to express a disagreement with the direction taken by our financial and political institutions. Nothing about wanting more taxes. And I'd like to show you one more article from our local Gazette. Occupy Montreal protesters are waving the flags of a plethora of issues. What do they want? And then here's the article itself, demanding change now. And they interviewed a bunch of young people who are down at the protest. And just below this article, achieving change. Is a global Robin Hood tax the way to go? There's that Robin Hood tax again. This is very significant. I mean, I'm starting to get the picture here. Occupy Wall Street is whatever it is. People are discontent and they're voicing their discontent. And I guess they feel they got to do something. I mean, you can't just sit around on your butt watching YouTube all day. But they want to go out and they want to express their discontent. But the media is spinning it. And it's so interesting the way they're spinning it, because what they're doing is, like I said, regardless of what Occupy Wall Street actually wants, the media is going to mold the public mind, get them to think that this is what the people want. They actually want more tax. And it's not Occupy Wall Street who wants more tax. So the media is really spinning this to make it look like it's all about taxes. And here's what they mention in this article from the Gazette. As the host of the G20 summit in Toronto in 2010, Finance Minister Jim Flaherty was instrumental in voting down an FTT, which is the financial transaction tax, as insurance for any future bank failures. This was last year. I told you they were talking about this last year. They want that. The government wants that. All right, and here's the kicker. All right, this Robin Hood tax, also known as the Tobin tax, which was proposed by James Tobin in 1972. They say, get ready for this, it's going to blow your mind. Now Tobin is joined by 3 other Nobel laureates, Bill Gates, Desmond Tutu, and at least 2 Democratic congressmen, a host of celebrities. Oh well, if the celebrities are on board, it must be good. The IMF, the French and German leaders. Look, if Bill Gates and the IMF are on board for the Robin Hood tax, that should tell you something. The press is going to be the instrument of the manipulation to get the public to accept something like more tax, like a 1% tax on financial transactions, when this was never what Occupy Wall Street was about. But this is what the government has wanted for a long time. I mean, Jim Flaherty was talking about it a year ago, and there was no Occupy Wall Street. And here's another thing. Speaking of the G20, we had the G20 last year, and we all said, this is a martial law drill. Why are they doing a martial law drill? Well, think about it. They were talking about wanting a 1% tax last year, and they were doing martial law drills at the G20. A year later, we have this enormous protest movement, which it's been shown now some of the leaders are people who are, trained and funded by U.S. think tanks, like Maher, what's his first name? I can't remember. Maher and Ivan Marovic from Serbia. That these people were trained and funded by U.S. interests, U.S. think tanks, and maybe even CIA. So you have this movement which is clearly being, subverted at the very least, and media is making it out to be this. It's gathering momentum. Do you think maybe they could impose martial law as well? Maybe that's what the drills were for, because they knew this was going to happen, because it's been engineered from the beginning. Maybe I'm just, being paranoid, but I don't think so. I think they know what they're doing. And I think that has also something to do with why it's getting so much publicity, and even the media seems to be very sympathetic to it. They want you to go down there and protest, but then they're just going to use it and turn it all against you and just bring in the next phase of the New World Order. And if they get rid of the Federal Reserve, probably it'll be replaced by the World Bank. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but like I said, I'm not, against the idea of the protest movement, but I have a very bad feeling about it. But I am going to go down today anyway and see what's going on. So let's hope I'm wrong about all this, but I don't think I am. Thanks for listening to me, and I'll see you next time.
Truth